Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio, and this is Webster Tarpley reporting from Washington, D.C. The overriding issue this week, fraud closures, highway robbery, piracy in the neighborhoods of the United States, the victims, American working families, the perpetrators, the zombie bankers, and their political minions reaching up into the Republican Party, and, of course, Wall Street puppet Barack Obama and his gang, including Axelrod and the rest of them. We'll have a special segment later in the broadcast on the unfolding crisis of the Obama regime. We're going to refer to the now notorious Ulsterman letters, a series of emails from a White House insider. But right now, let's focus on the question of fraud closures, illegal foreclosures, and the obvious remedy that we want to campaign for. Freeze all foreclosures. Stop all foreclosures dead in their tracks for 5 years or for the duration of the current world economic financial depression, whichever lasts longer. Stop the chaos. The zombie bankers created chaos with the bubble in the first place. They used hot money to bid up these prices. They created securitization. They made mortgages into derivatives, into mortgage-backed securities, collateralized debt obligations, structured investment vehicles. They sprinkled a good layer of credit default swaps on top. That all blew up in the world derivatives panic of September 2008, and that has caused this creation of a whole generation of homes that have been basically destroyed, people's lives that have been uprooted, displaced persons and refugees here on the home front in the United States. Again, attack on American working families by the zombie bankers. And now they want to foreclose. They say that they don't like to foreclose. They say, we do this so reluctantly. But as soon as you tell them that they can't do it, they're there with armies of lawyers and paid political hacks and political whores to make sure that they can foreclose. They want to foreclose. They obviously want to foreclose. They want to basically take your house and use that in this vain attempt to prop up the $1.5 quadrillion derivatives bubble, because that's what it comes down to. Obviously, this can't be done, but they're going to try, and they're going to destroy human civilization in the process. So, stop foreclosures. That's the overriding issue. And this is an issue where there now is ferment. There is some kind of mass mobilization beginning. We even have some Democratic Party politicians desperate to get some populist cover now in advance of the elections who are calling for a freeze on foreclosures. Now, they're talking in terms of 1 month, 2 months, maybe a little bit more. No. 5 years. Stop foreclosures for 5 years and or for the duration of the world economic crisis, whichever lasts longer. Now let's get into this question. We're told that the paperwork being used in foreclosures is sloppy. It's slipshod. It's got all kinds of cutting of corners has gone on. No, this is criminal fraud. Criminal fraud. Stop them. You want to talk about a government of laws? Do it now. You're interested in the Constitution? Due process? Assert it now. No state can deprive a citizen of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And in the case of foreclosures, that means one thing. Produce the note. Produce the note. Show me the original piece of paper that I signed with my moniker, my John Hancock on the paper, concrete paper, real physical paper, not some hoked-up Photoshop thing that you've got in your computer files. Produce the note, and if you can't, no foreclosure. So fight the foreclosures. Obviously, we're operating now on two levels. The general policy question is, you've got chaos. You've got chaos right now. The only way to bring order back into that chaos is to have the blanket federal, uniform, reliable, and predictable ban on foreclosures on primary residences for 5 years. But now individually, if you're in the trenches, And part of the organizing process of this movement is that individuals have got to fight foreclosures. If they can't produce the note, you better get a lawyer. It's worth doing. This is one of those rare occasions when it makes sense to go into the court and stop them. And we've got reports of basically corrupt judges, fascist judges in places like Florida, who are setting up rocket dockets of robo-judges who are simply approving as many foreclosures as possible. If that's going on in your community, you better start a demonstration at the courthouse. You better get busy, and you better call attention to it, because it can be shut down. Now, the idea, of course, is that during the bubble, they would take these mortgages. First of all, let's also add in the fact that the designers of these mortgage derivatives, these mortgage-backed securities or asset-backed securities, deliberately larded them and loaded them with mortgages that they knew would default. They wanted mortgages that would default because once a certain percentage of the mortgage-backed security has defaulted, the poor illiterate person, the poor bewildered person who bought a slum property in the inner city and then defaulted, they wanted that because that allows them then to claim the damages under the credit default swap. So they've essentially, it's like committing insurance fraud, right? Burning down a building to get the insurance. Well, the equivalent of that in the derivatives age is to load the mortgage-backed security with ipso facto insolvent paper that will never work so that you can get the money off the credit default swap. And indeed, a lot of these hyenas have already collected once in the form of their credit default swaps. That would be a consolation for them as they're told that they can't foreclose. Anyway, you make the mortgages, including the ones that you know are no good, into a mortgage-backed security. You pack that into a collateralized debt obligation. You put that collateralized debt obligation into another collateralized debt obligation, making a super CDO or CDO squared, and then you put that layer of credit default swaps on top. Maybe you want to pack that into a structured investment vehicle, and on and on. How many layers? The problem with that is the law, oh boy, the sanctity of contracts, the law, all these principles that the reactionary Republicans tell us they're so concerned about. The Constitution is even under attack here because in most American counties, there's a property office of the county, and the ownership of property has got to be recorded there in order to be valid. And the reason that you have that office is that is the way that a foreclosure would happen if it were going to be legal. But the problem is, you have then got to change the ownership registration every time that the mortgage-backed security and the CDO and the super CDO and the SIV change hands. And guess what? They didn't do it. They said, oh, we'll cut corners. We'll use MERS, the MERS, the Mortgage Electronic Recording System, I guess it is. In other words, a piece of fraud, which is not allowed to own things. It's listed as the owner, but it's really not the owner. So they've committed fraud. They've tried to defraud the counties by claiming that MERS is the owner when it's really not. So it means that the chain of ownership has been broken. Nobody knows who owns many of these mortgages. They've been cut into pieces. They've been sliced and diced. They've been put in with sauce, sprinkled with a condiment of credit default swaps, and so forth. Nobody knows who the owner is. We now have cases of homes that have no mortgage at all being seized by bandit zombie bankers and pirates, hedge fund hyenas and asset strippers. We've also got properties where 3 or 4 bankers have shown up. It's chaos. It's thievery. It's piracy. The answer, stop all foreclosures. Freeze them. Moratorium. No more foreclosures. Zombie bankers will eat the losses. And we'll be back in a minute on World Crisis Radio.